planning on being here tonight can get logged in. I'm not seeing any emails saying anybody's having issues, but I'll keep an eye on that. And like I said, we're going to be kind of informal. So welcome everyone to Roundabout Books Cozy Mystery Evening with Emily George and Emmeline Duncan. My name is Julie Swearingen. I'm the events manager at Roundabout Books. You may have noticed some changes in our event schedules recently, but we have a ton of events coming up in May and June. Our summer is going to be really packed with events, so watch for them to be on Zoom and in the store. We're really excited. So I am just going to read, actually, you know what? I'm not going to read your bio because I have questions for both of you that I think will get like us to the exact bio I would normally read. So if you hadn't watched one of our previous events, Emmeline Duncan has been here to talk with us before about her first Ground Rules mystery book, which is called Fresh Brewed Murder. And the only reason I don't have a copy in my hot little hands is that I've loaned it out. So I think that's a really good reason to not have one to show you, but I do have copies of both of the books we're going to talk about tonight. And then your next book, which I'll read as well. But I do like to loan my books. I don't know if you guys are both. I know some people don't. Some people cannot loan books. I'm fairly liberal with the loaning of my books.
My theory is I will loan any book if I know that it might not come back, and that won't be distressing. So if there's a book, if there's some reason it's like an edition that I like really care about, or I would be upset, then I don't. But I mean, I loan out almost all of my books, or I'm willing to, except for just a few Dragon Horde books, but that's it.
Yeah. Emily, are you happy to loan books to people?
No, I'm very particular. I'm very particular about who I lend them to, and they have to be someone that I can trust is gonna, take care of them. No, I will admit freely, I'm super precious about my book collection.
Yeah. I think I used to be, because I definitely had some books not come back, but it has to be a book that I've already read. So then, I'm not too worried about it. But I have been loaning more because I have quite the accumulation. Hi, Sage. So we're just getting started. Hold on. Do you want to unmute? I can unmute you. Do you want to say hello?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, fabulous. I can hear everyone else too.
So this is my friend Sage, and she comes to a lot of our events, and she bought both books and got the little
dark in here.
Grab bag that Emmeline dropped off. So thank you for that little swag bag. So Sage, you haven't really missed anything. We're getting started.
That's good.
So Emmeline, I want to start with you. What is maybe some people who are going to watch this later don't know, these are pen names, but we're going to focus on this pen name tonight. So what brought you to writing cozy mysteries as opposed to like super thriller, horror, blood and guts?
Well, that's interesting because my debut was actually a YA thriller that was much edgier than what I write for adults, which is pretty hilarious when you think about it. But I've always liked cozy mysteries and traditionals. And when I decided, I wrote a couple of manuscripts, like kind of the YA market. Like I said, I sold one. And when I decided to write for adults, my voice just naturally fell into the cozy genre. And because I've never been someone that's been really into like the CSI sort of aspects. I'm more into the how does like the death affect the community, and using more of the like everyday psychologist methods for solving a murder versus, something like a police officer would use. And setting one, it was interesting because the very first cozy manuscript I wrote wasn't about coffee. And it was actually my second one that I ended up writing around coffee because it's such a key part of like living in the Pacific Northwest, right? There's so many coffee roasteries and coffee shops. And I used to live, there used to be a food cart pod about 3/4 of a mile from my house with a coffee cart. And I got to know the owner of the coffee cart. My dog and I would walk down, I would order an iced coffee, my dog would get his daily biscuit. And I got to know some of the other food cart owners in this little pod. And I realized that was a great little community within a bigger city, which would be a fantastic spot to set a mystery.
Yeah, excellent. Emily, same for you. What drew you to cozies? And I guess in that vein, what drew you to including marijuana in your book?
Yeah, so I have been a cozy mystery fan for like a really long time. I think the very first like lot of adult books I ever read were Agatha Christie books when I was like maybe 11 or 12 years old. And I'm a person who loves a puzzle. I love to like try and figure things out. And my husband says I'm incredibly annoying to watch any kind of Law and Order or CSI show with, because I'm always like, oh, that person totally did it like 3 minutes into the episode. And I've gotten quite good at spotting things. So I've always just enjoyed that aspect of it. I actually, for anyone that doesn't know, I also write, I actually started my author career in romance, specifically in romantic comedy. And I actually found that the voice from romantic comedy translated really well into cozy mysteries. And I had written a lot of small towns before. And so I just really naturally gravitated towards that kind of like small town setting because I love creating fictional towns. So cozy just basically ticks every box of stuff I love in books. It's great characters. It's a lot of like strong female relationships, cute towns. I love dogs. So it was just like, it's totally my happy place as a reader and a writer. And as for the cannabis component, that's a really interesting one. So the publisher and my agent were actually talking about they were looking for a series with a cannabis element, and that they were kind of like, wanted someone like millennial-ish to write it. And my agent came to me and actually pitched the idea to me initially. And I laughed because I was like, that is not how I thought this phone conversation was going to go. And yet, as soon as she said it, Chloe popped into my head, like fully formed. The book deals a lot with sort of the medicinal side of cannabis because Chloe's grandmother has breast cancer. Both my mother and grandmother had breast cancer. So it's a topic that's really dear to my heart. And it just all of a sudden I was like, yes, this is the project I need to work on right now. And so I threw myself into the research because I have to admit, I actually didn't know about it before I dove into it. But the more I've learned about the medicinal benefits and how important it is to destigmatize cannabis, the more I've just gotten super excited about writing these books.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you had to do much research. I think for both of you, actually, because Emmeline, you said you went to a coffee cart a lot, but there is so much in your fresh brewed about, and being a barista at the bookstore, like we weigh our grounds, we time it, and when it's off. And I'm still very much like, I don't understand how this makes a difference, but if you tell me that's what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to do it. Did you do some research into the world of coffee beans?
Oh yeah. I will say when I was like a university student, I did work as a barista, and I have played around a lot with coffee at home. I have like at least 8 different ways to brew coffee. I've played around like roasting my own beans. And then I mean, I read a lot of things. There's a book like Uncommon Grounds about like the history of coffee, and there's like the little law book of coffee. And I've talked with roasters, and I've talked with baristas, and because like imagine like if you walk into like the coffee shop in the bookstore, and if it's a quiet day and someone asks you questions about like what you're doing, you're probably happy to tell you what we do in the shop. I mean, if you have like a line out the door, of course you're gonna be like, not now, please. And so I've done that, with like some of the local roasters. If they're quiet, like, hey, can I ask you a couple questions? And if they're not, busy, people are almost always willing to chat. I mean, and even things like Stumptown Coffee, they have a lot of like how-tos on their website. Like if you want to do the perfect pour over, they spent time like, making how-tos for people to like learn like the quote unquote best ways to make coffee. And so I mean, I've read very widely in different ways. And I mean, and like I said, I've played around with roasting my own beans. I have cold shots before, and like a small coffee shop.
So Emily, when you're researching cannabis, and I love that, this is billed as like the first mystery involving cannabis and a cannabis shop. And, so here's what's really funny. The bookstore is in Bend. I live about 15 minutes north in Redmond. Redmond does not allow dispensaries. The city council decided they didn't want that extra income, and we don't have them, which is a bummer. So I have to go when I'm in Bend. If you feel like you're comfortable sharing, did your research involve any testing of these recipes?
It involved some testing of edibles.
Okay.
So I had like I kind of grew up being like a real like 90s kind of kid. I feel like when I went to school, especially in Australia, which is where I'm from, cannabis was very frowned upon, let's say, as I was growing up. And so I didn't have a lot of personal knowledge about it. I am that like hardcore goody two shoes person. So if my parents tell me not to do something, I won't do it. That's me. And so when we moved, my husband and I moved to Toronto, and by that stage, it was already decriminalized and then has since become fully legal. We literally have a dispensary across the road from where we live, across the street. And so as I started to do research into cannabis, I was becoming a bit more curious about like, well, you know, what does it involve? And I'm actually a really terrible sleeper. I am like, anytime I have any amount of stress, immediately cannot sleep, and it can get quite bad sometimes. So I found out that like CBD and melatonin gummies are a thing, and they're amazing, and they basically immediately put me to sleep, and it's blissful. So I did try a few different things. I would say probably the bulk of the research was a bit more like academic, just because I'm still learning my own relationship with what I'm comfortable testing, what I'm not comfortable testing, how it affects me, and that sort of stuff. And I think that's just, it's something important for anyone trying a new thing, is just to take it slow and, you know, learn about it as much as you can. I watched a lot of, I actually managed to find a show that's essentially MasterChef with weed, which is like the best thing ever. So I watched a ton of that and read a ton of books, and yeah, tried a few little things myself just to understand what it feels like. And it's been a roller coaster. It's been really fun.
That's awesome. So let's go ahead and kind of dive more into the mystery side of your books. I mentioned this before we officially started the event. We're not giving a spoiler away to say that in both of these books, there is a murder very quickly. And especially in Emily's book, there is a murder of a very unlikable character, in a sense that when I was reading it and that happened, I was like, yay. Like, I don't wish that on, but like this fictional character, I definitely wished it upon. So when you're kind of trying to create that, we'll start with Emily. How do you picture and how do you get in the mindset to kill someone in a book?
Well, maybe that happens a little too easily, and perhaps I should examine that. It's funny. I think just because I have been reading mysteries for so long, that part of the process just came very naturally to me. So a lot of authors will talk about like, you know, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? I'm a very organic writer. I sort of feel like sometimes I don't make decisions about the book so much as my brain is just produces something and I have to just type it out. That is a little bit how my process works. And literally the second that he walked on the page, I was like, yeah, this guy, he needs to go. And that was it. It's just, I knew straight away, I knew exactly what was going to happen. And I did want to do a little bit of the trope that we find in cozies of the very unlikable character being killed off, because there's a bit of schadenfreude in that, as someone kind of getting their just desserts, as it were. So yes, that's how I go into that.
Emmeline, you had a very similar one in that he is we don't know a lot about the character who is murdered, but he does come off a little unlikable right away. But also your character, whose name is Sage, which is, you know, our little like fun within the book. She kind of has a thought though, where she's like, he still didn't deserve this. Like, she's very, you know, why did this still happen to him? So kind of talk about your process of picking the character to kill off.
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm actually presenting a mystery writing class. I'm co-teaching it in August, and I was joking earlier today with my co-teacher that if you create a character that a lot of people want to kill, it makes it a lot easier to come up with your clues than red herrings. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that you're like, oh, everyone wants to kill them, but someone that for whatever reason is going to have a lot of strife with the people around them. Like if you watch the show After Party, right? That was, you know, which was on Apple TV. It's really good. It's if you haven't, you should watch it. And it's someone who's like hit it big as a pop star, and it's like after his 10-year reunion, the people come to his house party and he dies. well, he's hit it big and not all his classmates have. And so like, why does he have strife with each of them? And so it's the same thing with my books, you know, who are the characters that are going to populate this story? And with a coffee card, I can move it to kind of create a different setting every time. It's like, who populates the story, who has reasons to be in strife with each other, and then who's going to die. You know, and when I first started writing, I thought I was also like a really organic writer, but once I started writing under contract and I started to have to turn in like a synopsis, I started doing a lot more pre-work. And so I definitely knew, I knew a lot more, I knew all the logic behind like who is going to die and why. And I would like to point out that there is actually a clue in the title of my third book that Emily might be one of the few people that is going to get off the top of her head.
About the origins of the...
just a note about the person who is going to die.
Okay. Yes.
Do you get it?
I won't say anything, but yes.
Okay. You can say
I don't
it
want to
because
spoil it, but yes.
it happens in like 20 pages. You can say it.
Or that flat whites are from Australia. Is that? Yes.
Yeah.
If there's any New Zealanders watching, they will claim that it's New Zealand, but it's me. It's Australia.
I know there's that whole
Sorry,
like
Kiwis.
argument over who, and like the long black and the flat white being really
Yes.
big. Yes.
Yes. Oh, I haven't heard long black in a long time.
When I visited Australia and New Zealand, like that was my drink. So yeah. Flat white's a little easier to use in a cover than long black. It starts getting a little more awkward. But.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit without giving away spoilers about just your main characters need to solve this. So Emmeline, in my reading, having read the first two, not the third, but Sage seems compelled to solve this for almost like the greater good of like the person that was killed too. Like it's the community that's around her. Do you think that like, I mean, were you really intentional saying that she is that person that like, she just can't let it go?
Yeah, well, that's one reason why I gave her the backstory of, you know, her mother is a really notorious con artist, and she feels a lot of guilt even for things that aren't her fault. And so it's that natural desire of wanting to fix things that I think get her involved in the murders. And you know, and so far there's always like some reason where it does, you know, like she finds the body holding one of her coffee cups. It's, you know, the murder weapon came from her coffee cart. Like in the third book, the character dies in her coffee roaster, even though there's no reason the character should be there. So there are like reasons that are going to draw her in, but she also, you know, does have that strong sense of wanting to make the world a better place. And that includes, you know, wanting to solve mysteries. And I think a really core part of Cozy Mysteries is the murder happens and it throws the community out of balance. And the cozy, you know, sleuth actually solves it and kind of brings the community back into order, right? And so it's not going to return to normal. It moves into a new normal. But that's such like, I think, a key part of the mysteries is that it's making the world feel like it should versus being out of sync. And so, yeah, and Sage definitely has this really strong desire, you know, and because she could be a con artist if she wanted, but she's way too principled, she's also really good at hearing what people are saying and what they're not, and seeing the small clues of like they're lying or there's something, gets a good sense of when that they're not telling all the story.
Yeah. Emily, I feel like yours is a little bit of the flip of that because Chloe is the one, she's new, or not new, but back in town after an extended, you know, absence from her hometown, reestablishing relationships with her grandma and her aunt, obviously getting hit on by a guy from high school that she wants nothing to do with, and this possible business opportunity. What I got with her though was her impetus to solve it is because they think originally they think her aunt, you know, they immediately go to her aunt. So it felt more kind of like it was to just save like very specific people as opposed to like the whole community. So what is your thought about that with why Chloe wants to solve this mystery?
Yeah, Chloe's definitely motivated by the fact that her aunt, who is someone she deeply cares about since her own mother hasn't been really around in her life, she wants to obviously prevent her aunt from being, you know, pointed at for a crime that she didn't commit. But I think Chloe also as a character is although she's sometimes somewhat reluctant to act, she's quite a cautious person, but she does have a very deeply ingrained sense of right and wrong that I think is sort of triggered by the murder. That even though, yeah, let's face it, this guy is someone that when he dies, everyone was like, oh, it was bound to happen at some point. She still thinks that that's wrong, and that, you know, her town isn't a town where that kind of stuff happens. And I think that she has a deep need for sort of stability and equilibrium in her life, and a murder goes against that. And so for her, it is a little bit about trying to restore the balance of the peace and harmony of the place that she thinks is kind of like a safe haven from, you know, the troubles of the world. So yeah, she, in the first book for sure, she definitely has that impetus of it's her aunt that's getting looked at by the police. But I think for her, there's definitely a sort of like sub layer under that, which is about, you know, if we allow a murderer to go free in our town, that's bad for everybody. And, you know, things won't be right until we fix that.
Yeah. The truth has to come out. So over the years, because back in the early 2000s, I worked at Barnes & Noble at the time when the biggest cozy mysteries were the Cat Who series. I don't know if either of you are familiar with those, by Lillian Jackson Braun. My grandma had Siamese, so she loved those, until there was a parody book put out called The Cat Who Killed Lillian Jackson Braun, which I also thought was amusing. Kind of like beach reads, do you feel like you ever, like, do you hear that cozy mysteries kind of get pushed aside when people are thinking about like fun, again, a mystery without the horror and the gore? Like, what's your take on why people should start reading cozy mysteries or keep reading them? I'll start with Emily.
I would say definitely. Well, did you say Emily or Emmeline?
Emily, sorry.
It's very similar.
It is very similar, isn't it? You know, it's funny coming from having started my career in romance, where I feel like that genre absolutely gets tarred with that brush, and then I come over to cozies and it's exactly the same. And I was like, well, I guess this is my lot in the author life. And I think the reason that both they can be a little bit maligned, but also the reason that people should read them, funnily enough, is kind of exactly the same thing, is I think that they allow us a safe fictional space to explore things, whether that is, you know, in romance, it's finding love and dealing with emotions, or in cozies, it's often about building friendships and tackling things that scare us and solving puzzles and solving problems. I think that cozies really allow the reader to sort of step outside of their comfort zone and, you know, take part in a story and just do something that's really safe and fun, and it's kind of wholesome in a way. Like, it's uplifting, it's just that feel-good factor. But at the same time, a lot of cozies deal with some really serious issues. Like in A Half-Baked Murder, Chloe's grandmother has breast cancer, and unfortunately it's a difficult topic to make fun and lighthearted, because it's not, it's scary, and there's a lot of women that have to face that. So I think what I love about that is the juxtaposition between the light and the fun, and then also being able to deal with some of these serious issues in a way that perhaps won't sort of traumatize the reader. It is a sort of a bit of a safer genre for those things. And I think that there's just, you know, again, a lot of strong female friendships. It's a great place if you're feeling like that the real world is a little bit scary sometimes. Like, a cozy is the thing that I go to when I'm dealing with anything tough personally, because it just feels warm and welcoming and really enjoyable.
Yeah. So Emmeline, before we get to you, I just wanted to point out, back in February when we were getting ready for the original date of our event, I decided to put up a cozy mystery display at the store. We've each been able to kind of like pick a month and we can do these. And the first person I reached out to was Emmeline, being like, hey, I need, like, I know I have your books and I can't get the Cat Who series anymore, but I haven't read cozies in quite a while. And you gave me just the best list, the Barks and Beans, there's an arts and crafts cozy series. So obviously, I know you read a lot of it. So Emmeline, what do you, I guess, want people to know that's so wonderful about cozies?
Yeah, and I think it is true, I'd say in the greater mystery world, like sometimes cozies are sort of treated like less than in a similar way that like romance is also treated less than. And and one thing that I find really frustrating about that is those are both areas where it's like women following their passion is a huge part, of the books. It's cozy that's like, oh, I love like this obscure craft, and they are able to turn it into a career, right? And they're able to do that while probably finding a good relationship, making good friends, and like living their best life. And who doesn't want to read about people living their best lives while also solving murders, right? And and I think some, not all cozies touch with like real world issues, like more and more are doing it.
Mhm.
And I do appreciate that they talk about real world stuff, but still in a hopeful way, right? Like you don't go in, you know that you're not going to be depressed about some serious issues, but they're still going to acknowledge they're part of the world that we all navigate. And I think during the pandemic, especially, people were looking for more comfort reads. Like for example, I think that's why literature and lattes, like the timing for that when it came out was perfect, right? Because it was like Dungeons and Dragons, high fantasy with absolutely no stakes, right? It's incredibly low stakes. And people want that. And there are times like when a friend of mine, after she had her baby, she reread all of Donna Andrews' cozy mysteries because while she was like breastfeeding her son, and she's like, I can't read stuff that makes me depressed about the world, right? While she's like tired and caring for a small human, but reading fun cozies where she feels like she's visiting friends, she has the puzzle, she's excited to read them. It was like the perfect read. And I would note too, in the last, probably 4 or 5 years, there have been more and more kind of like millennial cozies, which is, it's a good term, but it shouldn't be seen as a limiting term. It just means those are a little bit more, maybe more likely to have urban touches, definitely more likely to have real world. But I think those are helping also bring in younger readers to the cozy sort of, ecosystem where they're like, oh, these are books that are also for you and that you might absolutely love. So read them because they're really fun. Oh, and they tend to be very well plotted and they tend to be brisk. Like you're not going to get 20 pages of nasal gazing ever.
Thank goodness.
Well, and that's when some of them were harder to get. And that's, I think, maybe just the nature of the business with how certain publishers, stock their books. But we definitely did some of the barks and beans, which, every book is about like a different dog. And I just think that kind of takes me back to, I guess you would kind of call these cozies as kids, but did anybody read the Bunnicula series?
I love Bunnicula.
I actually got it out from the library like over the winter, like back before.
Yeah.
Emily, you should read them. It's a vampire bunny, but it eats carrots and like turnips and vegetables.
Okay, I'm immediately
all their color.
Yeah, but there's still some sort of mystery. I feel like, isn't there a mystery outside of it? And then there's a cat and a dog that help him, and they all, so it's the vegetable stalks at midnight, and they're punny. Like the names are always punny.
Yeah,
that was the other thing I noticed about some of the cozies we brought in, is that they absolutely embrace the punny title, like Remodeled to Death, or Death at a Book Club, like all these things. And there's a couple new books out right now. One is actually called Death of a Bookseller, and I still have yet to read it, but it's that kind of like, I think somebody dies at their bookstore and then something, anyway. It's one of these funny things, but as I was like reading through the titles, I was getting such a kick out of like, I can't do puns. I'm very bad at them. So I have reverence for people who can come up with a title like that. Let's kind of talk about that, because this is something I always like to talk about with any author, but how do you come up with a title? I mean, you want it to let people know what's going on, but to not maybe like hit them over the head. And yet at the same time with these ones, it always is a little punny, right? Like Emmeline, your first one, A Fresh Brewed Murder. So like, we already know we're going to get coffee, like Double Shot Death, Flat White Fatality. So are you coming up with them on your own, or is it, okay, good, I want to hear more about this then? Like,
So I write down, like, I'll kind of have a running list of like, if I think of like coffee puns, and write down even kind of like terms. And then for every book, like my editor has been like, do you have title suggestions? And I've sent him a list. I'm talking, sometimes they're like 10, 15 titles. But I always mention like, this is like my favorite, usually like my top 2. And then he takes it to marketing meeting, and then they come back with usually their top 2. And I've, like I was actually, when I was writing like Double Shot Death, I was calling it Muddied Water, and they're like, they didn't like Muddied Water as a title, but they love Double Shot Death. That was fine. And it's kind of fun because book 4, the title for book 4 is one that's actually been a contender like multiple times. And I'm like, no, we're going to use it. And that's Death Unfiltered.
Oh, that's good.
Oh,
But like, I have a lot of like, I had a very specific sort of, and then, I mean, it's hard, I can't even really verbalize what it is, but I have a theme with like, Fresh Food Murder and Double Shot Death of being puns, but a very specific type of pun. Because like, I had one title and I joked with my agent, like, this might be like a pun too far. And he's like, that's not possible in cozies. But I wanted it to kind of, it didn't quite fit the vibe I was going for. And so that's one I've saved. I'm going to use it as a pun in a book, but it's not a cover pun.
yeah. So Emily, kind of same question to you. I mean, did you ever feel maybe limited because you obviously want the title of your book to be that pun on cannabis of half-baked, but then, a half-baked murder? Like how did that work out with the title?
My husband and I literally went for a walk and brainstormed every weed term that we could think of, every slang word for weed that we could possibly come up with. And I was like literally walking down the street, putting it all in my phone as we were brainstorming. And then I tried to figure out, and baked obviously was like the perfect one because she's a baker and it's a cafe with like lots of baked goods. But I also liked the idea of using the half baked because it's kind of like murder is always a bad idea. So it has that like extra twist. I was like, yeah, this is like a 3-in-1 pun. I love it. And then the second book is set around a big surfing competition that comes to the town, and it's called A High Tide Murder. So yeah. So coming up with the title is basically my favorite part of the whole process. I write in Scrivener, which is a program where you can keep all of your research and your writing and everything in the one place. And I literally have one folder that's just puns and title ideas. Anytime I think of anything, it goes in the document. And I didn't even give my editor options. I was like, this is what I'm calling it. And she's like, yeah, that's good.
I think that's really fun. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, it was a couple of years ago, I was joking. I didn't go beyond the titles. We're like, oh, we should do like a pot shop, like cozy, which I didn't really think would fly because cozies are a little bit conservative. So when I saw there was one, I'm like, oh, that's great. But but it was so much fun coming up with. There's so many options, like
so many.
You'd be like ganja and gumshoes, right?
Yeah,
like there's so many random hilarious things you can go with.
Yeah, there was like something about grass being greener and like just there's a whole list. So I really hope we get to do more books in the series because I've got a bunch of titles I would love to use.
That's kind of fun because I think a lot of readers, and we talk about this on a lot of our events, just the process of writing, the process of getting published. But coming up with a title for a book can be very hard because again, you want to make sure it pulls somebody in, but it doesn't like tell them everything or something like that. So I think it's really fun that you can do so much with so few words on the cover of a cozy. Like you really can. I mean, you are giving it away without giving it away. Yeah, I really like that. So I can't really think of anything else. I would love to either just hear more from either of you if you have questions for each other. Sage, I wasn't sure if you had questions for either author, because I know you read the first one, right? You've read Fresh Food Murder.
Yeah, I got my books a little late because I wasn't paying attention to my email.
It happens.
She's like, are you picking them up? They're ready. And I'm like, they are.
Right. We ran into each other at a Celtic festival last weekend and I was like, your books are at the store.
So I've just gotten into them, but I suppose I've always liked murder mysteries from Nancy Drew all the way through. And I even now sometimes just, like I said, I pulled Banicula out and got it off the library for audiobooks for my car because I just need a mental break from things that make me think harder. And that's what I love about these these type of books. I fit them in between the stuff that makes me think really hard and challenges me, and stuff that I pick people give me that I was like, I'd never pick this up, and then I'm like, I really should have known better. And so, but I like puzzles too. My family won't do mystery puzzle games with me because, or watch the TV shows, because about halfway through anything, I'm like, oh, it's so and so. And they're like, you're wrong. And at the end, I'm right. And they hate it. So, but I love the idea of just kind of curious, you know, how do you sit down and create your first character? I mean, these are very unique women, and I love them, their quirkiness and their joy and their inquisitiveness. But when you first sit down and you know you're writing a new story or new character, just kind of get into that, how does that develop for you? Is it something that sort of reflects yourself in them?
Well, when I think of characters, like it's like I mean, you have to think of where they grew up and like the kind of like the setting of like where they live and where they came from, right? Because everyone, like their past always affects someone, and so figuring out your character's backstory helps figure out like how they respond to the challenges in their life. And it's interesting because, and you know, and also like, I mean, where they live is both going to really affect the mystery that they're going to solve, but also like what kind of career they're in, right? Like you're not going to be a surf instructor if you live in Minnesota, right? You know, and so you're going to start kind of whittling down some of their aspects, you know. And so when I write a new character, like it's funny, I don't always know what inspired the original story, but I know when I started getting a sense of Sage, a lot of stuff fell into place where I wanted her to be a really, you know, kind of a natural lie detector, and I wanted her to have one parent who was pretty sketchy and one parent that's, you know, very honorable. So that's sort of like two dichotomies that she's always been caught between.
Okay, cool.
And I also think with like her brother and some of the like she has an older half brother who became like a child advocate, you know, as attorney, and he's also reacting to their sort of shared backstory, but he reacted in a very different way.
Okay. Emily, what about Chloe? How'd you make her?
I think one of the starting places for me with Chloe was that was kind of the cannabis element a little bit, because I knew that we wanted to set a book around a cafe with cannabis. And so I'm like, okay, obviously she has to work in the food industry. That's kind of like a given. But then I was like, what is something that I can pair with cannabis that might not feel like the immediate option, that might feel just a little bit like a bit different, something a little bit unexpected? And that's when I was like, oh, she's going to be like a Michelin-star level pastry chef that's like trained at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, is like, you know, used to putting her desserts together with tweezers. And because I feel like that's not the thing that people would think to pair with cannabis, but actually I think those two would go really well together, which is why I wanted to sort of give her bakery this like kind of Parisian upmarket, like fancy little cakes, but with weed in it, just because I really like things that feel like they don't go together. That's just a funny personal thing of mine. So I kind of started there, and then I, from that, think about, okay, well, what kind of person might be driven to pursue a career like being a Michelin level pastry chef? Like what kind of qualities would they need to have? They need to be exceptionally dedicated, hardworking, super attention to detail, which also coincidentally is like good things for a sleuth to have: attention to detail and a sort of dogged persistence about them. And so it kind of is this almost like unraveling an onion. I think character development is you kind of start with like one little thing, and then you just go deeper and you go deeper and you go deeper and see what is underneath all of those layers. And then I, from that, even then start building the world around them. So I know that if Chloe is naturally a kind of conservative, cautious person, I need to put someone with her that is going to continually poke at her to do things and to go outside her comfort zone. And so that's how we end up with Aunt Dawn, who is basically the complete opposite to Chloe, and that she's this kind of like lovely hippie character that's just, you know, doesn't like to be told what to do and would just chase every whim that comes near her. So yeah, it's always like starting with like one little point and then just kind of like scratching at that and seeing how deep I can go with it, and then using that to sort of seed the rest of the people in the book.
Very cool.
Excellent, thank you. So you're both working on a next book in these series, it sounds like. So Emmeline will get book 4 and Emily, we might get book 2. It sounds like. Okay. Do you have any time frames on those?
Yeah, so book 2 is actually written and revised already. So that is coming out, I believe, February 2024. It's quite like a long time between the books, but that's when the next one is due. And I'm actually writing the 3rd book at the moment, which is set at an ice cream festival. So that is, and it's got a sort of like a podcast type element to it. So yeah, so there's definitely like for sure going to be 3 books in this series, and fingers crossed, maybe more.
Yeah. Emmeline?
For me, the 4th book in the Ground Rules series comes out in April 2024, and that is at my publisher. It's done, and this summer we'll start writing book 5, and then I have another unannounced cozy series that will be launching in October 2024, which is what I am actually in the middle of writing right now.
Awesome. That sounds fun to look forward to. I do have to say one thing. You explained in the beginning why you chose coffee, but have you ever thought about doing one around beer?
Yes, actually, my very first cozy manuscript, the one that I signed with my agent, was actually around beer. It was set in Oregon, and like female brewer starting a business with her twin brother and their like childhood best friend. And, you know, being in a small town on the Oregon coast and being one of the like an early sign of gentrification. And yeah, and it got good feedback, but it was a lot of also some weird stuff like not thinking there was a big enough market amongst cozy readers for beer. And there have since been 2 other beer series. I think one did 3 books and one did 5. So I don't know if that's true or not.
It's
no,
just
I would
so Pacific Northwest, right? Like it's funny because I don't drink beer, so it's real fun to live in this area. But it's just one of those like, it's so Oregon now.
No, I think that would be really fun. But it's funny, my agent a while back was like, do you think you could revise that? You know, maybe like with what you've learned, you know, now that you've written other stuff, and you know, and I'm like, maybe is it, you know, but would it sell then, or would it still be the like hesitation about the appeal of beer in the cozy market?
Yeah. Well, excellent. So one of the things I like to do as we kind of get towards the end of our events is tell me a couple of books that you've been reading and a couple of books in this genre that you would really recommend outside of your own. So I'm going to start with Emmeline. Sorry to call on you, but simply because I know that you know a lot of cozy mysteries too. So what are you reading for pleasure right now?
Well, you know, what's funny is that I actually was just like finished reading the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews, which isn't cozy. It's probably one of the best like books of like the urban fantasy sort of like era, and it's just really fantastic. And I just finished not too long ago like book 10, which was the final in like that series, and it was pretty amazing. It came to an absolutely phenomenal end. They introduced some things that eventually came to fruition. I'm trying to be like a little bit vague, but they did just like a fantastic job of a really satisfying series end, which is really hard to do, especially when it is like 10 books. But they did a great job. It's a husband, I keep saying maybe it's a husband and wife team that wrote it. Nice. And they kept doing a really good job of just continuing to build the world. As far as cozies, I would say Kate Lansing, she has a wine series set in Boulder, Colorado. The first is Killer Chardonnay. If you like my series, that would be a really good one. There's a Magical Cats librarian series that's really fun, and it's a librarian somewhere in Michigan that has these 2 slightly magical cats that will kind of help her solve mysteries. Like one can turn himself invisible and one can walk through walls. And so sometimes one will like walk through a wall and come back with a piece of paper and like, oh, it's a clue.
That's fun. Yeah.
That's really cool. Sophia Kelly is the author.
Okay. Emily, what about you?
I read recently the first 2 books in Tara Lush's series that's also a coffee shop mystery set in Florida, which is super fun. It's set in this like kind of like an island community where it's like super quirky and lots of like really unusual residents in the town. So I really love her writing. I think that series is super fun, and it has a cute little dog, which is always a big tick for me. And it was already mentioned earlier in this chat, but Legends and Lattes by, I think it's Travis Baldry that wrote that wrote that. I'm a massive Dungeons and Dragons nerd. It was just my heart in a book. I guess it's not technically a cozy mystery, but it is definitely cozy fantasy. So it's kind of like adjacent. Really super loved that. It was lots of fun. And I actually, speaking of beer cozies, really enjoyed Ellie Alexander's Sloane Krause series, and also the one set in the Ashland Bakery as well. The name is escaped me. There's like a bajillion books.
It's the Bake Shop Mysteries.
The Bake Shop Mysteries, that's it. Yeah, I think she's a phenomenal writer, great characters, and always a really well plotted, interesting mystery. So those would be my recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you both. I actually think we got in a couple of the Bake Shop Mysteries, and I know we have Legends and Lattes on display because one of our newer booksellers is really into like, she's our fantasy person. Whenever somebody comes in and is like, I need a rec, I'm like, you want to talk to her, not me. I can give you mystery, YA, and a bunch of other ones, but not a lot of fantasy. So I'll maybe have to check it out just to see kind of the blending of the two fun genres.
They make a point on the cover about it being low stakes. So it's like, it's definitely not like a cozy mystery, because there's no mystery. It's, right, you know, it's like an orc retiring from campaigning and opening a coffee shop.
Yeah,
I kind of love the new term of like low stakes, because years ago when I worked at Barnes and Noble, you know, there was like, we would have a display every summer for beach reads, but again, beach reads kind of get that like bad reputation of like, you don't have to think. I would like to think of these as low spoons. I have no more spoons to give and I still want to enjoy something, and these are low spoons. Like, it's fun and funny, but I don't at the end of it have a headache.
Yeah, there's no like angst. I think that's the thing that sometimes, like when I'm super tired at the end of the day, or I've had like my husband has been very ill, so it's been a really stressful time in our house, and when I pick up a book, like I don't want something else that's going to squeeze my heart any more than it's already been squeezed for that day. So I just want something like that feels like a big warm blanket. It just makes me feel happy. Yeah. That's like, that to me is like cozy mystery in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly the subgenre. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to talk with me and Sage tonight. Emily, I wish your husband the best of health. And again, thank you so much for rescheduling. And I'm so glad it worked out in that way. And we do have signed copies of Double Shot Death in the bookstore, as well as some swag bags. So we were going to put those out, I think, on display so people can grab a book and grab one of those. And I don't have one handy, I apologize, but the stickers in it are amazing. And I might have to keep one for myself for my water bottle. So thank you for bringing those by, Emmeline. And please stop by the store again the next time you're down in Bend. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. You guys get back to your wonderful evening. I'm going to take the dog outside since she's been so good and quiet during this. And I just really appreciate you both again taking the time to talk with us about your books and cozies in general, and just reminding people why these books are really fun and why you should come to Roundabout Books to pick them up.
Thanks for hosting us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
you are so
much.
welcome.
It's great to talk to both of you.
Yeah, so nice to be
finishing
here.
up.
Right? It's our very own Sage. She's just not the Sage in the book.
I know. She told me there's a character named Sage. I'm like, I have to get it. I have to always pick up Sage.
Right? It's excellent. All right. Well, until next time, everyone, happy reading.
Thank you too.
Bye.
All right.